this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. This 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca, co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, and writer and teacher Jessica. We're online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find our personal social media handles as at Don Eduardo Barca and on Instagram, and just his Twitter handle as at jhomie89. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. All right. Well, today we're joined with grassroots organizer Michael Kane, longtime grassroots organizer. Since we've last had him here, it was very exciting and very. We had a very animated discussion with you last time, Michael, and we've missed you here. So now we're back, and for those who don't know you, you're the grassroots organizer for the American Values of 2024 Super PAC, which people can find online as AmericanValues2024.org. And Michael, you were formerly the organizer for Children's Health Defense, and you were also the founder of TeachersForChoice.org, and the lead plaintiff in Kane versus De Blasio, having been denied a religious exemption request and appeal. Correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So we're excited to have you because we're going to have a discussion on the elections and, in particular, RFK Jr. and everything around that, and see where this discussion takes us. But first of all, why don't you share with us, how are you? What's been going on since we've last spoken with you?
Yeah,
just briefly.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, it's been a year and a half, 2 years. I don't even know. We talked earlier on, 2 years. Yeah, Andy says earlier on in the pandemic. We've stayed in touch electronically and email since that time. You know, a lot has gone on. I'm in New York. I lived in New York City. We put a real big force against medical mandates here. A number of things happened. You know, we rallied thousands of people at City Hall in New York City. We got thousands of people in Albany, the capital of New York. And then in early 2022, 40,000 people in Washington, D.C. I helped to organize that behind the scenes with Defeat the Mandates. Then the convoy came in Canada. There was a convoy across the country that I covered for CHD.TV. And, you know, we've kind of turned the corner to where we're on the offensive with this. And it's not that everything's been cleaned up or anything at all, but it's a brand new day in 2023 compared to what we were dealing with in 2020 and 2021. A lot of people have woken up to like, what is going on here? People are questioning the entire CDC vaccine schedule. I saw one poll where 30% of parents were questioning the schedule. I think that was 3% just 3 or 4 years ago. It was minuscule. And so we're in a totally new paradigm. I'm still with Teachers for Choice. We were actually just at the courthouse just a few days ago for a new lawsuit that we have going called DeCapua versus City of New York, seeking to certify the very first class action in New York City for fired workers. And it's going positive. We go back to court on August 14th. And my work has taken me to a place where I was recruited to join this PAC, American Values 2024, to help get Bobby Kennedy elected president. And I got the blessing for it from all the people in medical freedom who I felt I needed the blessing for. I love Children's Health Defense. I imagine I might be back there one day. But right now, for so I'll just kind of put it like this, because this is how it makes the most sense to me. A lot of people told me, whatever it was, 10, 16 years ago, I don't even remember, they had to be able to tell their children they voted for the first Black president with Barack Obama. It resonated in them. It was something. I didn't feel that. I didn't like Obama, just for my own reasons. From what I saw, I didn't really trust what we were being sold about him. But I respected that from what people were saying. I understood where they were coming from. I have to be able to tell my sons when they grow up, I voted for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president, and to be able to tell them I put every ounce of energy into making that happen resonates with me very similarly to the way I think the ideas that I just said about Barack Obama resonated with many, many people that I knew. So, it's in alignment with me. I think it is the right thing. And the narrative that we've seen break into the mainstream media already for medical freedom fighters like ourselves is just remarkable. Earlier today, actually, as we're recording this, there was congressional hearings where, into the congressional record, he discussed how there's never been a placebo-controlled pre-licensure study for any vaccine. He was on News Nation recently, where he confronted a pediatrician about the CDC vaccine schedule, and for 13 minutes went into the dangers of the DTP vaccine, not given in America anymore, banned here, but given in Africa very, very regularly, as well as how the varicella vaccine has led to shingles outbreaks. There was one tweet from I think, Chief Nerd. It's been viewed over 19 million times on Twitter from one tweet. So these are things we haven't seen before. We haven't seen a lot of these issues that I've seen discussed, for 20 years in the corners of the internet or on, various alternative shows and podcasts. Now we're breaking mainstream. So to me, it's very exciting. No matter what happens in the election itself, what I've already seen happen in the mainstream narrative is something, I didn't know if I'd ever see. So it's exciting times for me right now. Yeah.
You know, you've done so much. I don't think you've realized how far you've reached, even to our show personally. And before we even follow up with anything that you've just touched on, I just wanted to give Jess a chance to share something, because it's actually the reason why she's here.
Great.
Oh yeah, so I was just saying to Andy and Eduardo when Andy said, like, oh yeah, Michael's coming on. Well, first of all, super stoked to meet you, because I've been following Teachers for Choice like pretty early days, because I was over in Seattle teaching at University of Washington and just going berserk, like feeling like I was the only educator in the whole Pacific Northwest who was against the lockdowns and then the mandates when they came. So I knew who you were, and I was like just super inspired by your organizing efforts. And yeah, totally agree with Eduardo. Like, I think all of us, like, not even just in the anti-mandate space, but just organizers in general, have a ton to learn from you. And yeah, it's just been cool to see the progress. But there's also a weird connection to What's Left, because I watched your episode on What's Left. That was the first time I had ever encountered What's Left, because I was following your like blog or email posts or whatever. And so I was like, oh, I'll watch Michael on this show. And so that was how I first encountered these two. And then eventually they had me on, and then now here I am as a co-host.
Oh,
so
that's great.
yeah, you're literally the reason that I joined.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. That's a great story. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Plus, when we were doing our first round here, Eduardo had thought it was workers and students for choice in New York. And I was like, no, that's our group. We're called Workers and Students for Choice. But the reason we started our group, Michael, is it came as a result of that interview we had with you. Is like, we really felt, and we're kind of like, we need to start doing something like this now. And I know it wasn't just the episode. You had followed up with me and kind of said, y'all got to get started on that. And I do think it was central towards us starting that group. So the reason this group exists, that group exists today, and it's been a lifeline for people who felt very isolated.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've done the kind of organizing you guys have done. In fact, I would say we haven't. But what it has been is a place that people who were isolated could come and talk about their situation. I do think we helped a few people work through mandate drama at work and things like that.
And the LA folk.
Yeah,
We help
and
the LA
connect
folk a
people
lot.
in California. I think we've done a pretty good job of that, and maintain connections with people in New Mexico, the National Coalition for Health Integrity. So I do feel like you've had a big impact on our organizing around us. So I appreciate that. And it's good to be back. And like you had reached out to me about like, hey Andy, what do you think about RFK Jr? And I was like, I'm not planning on voting for this person. And you were like, wait, what? And then out of that text, you were like, let's do this. Let's have a discussion here. Because you're clearly passionate about that. And I'm passionate about where I'm coming from. And let's just see what it leads to. And that's what we're hoping to do today.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I want to speak for Eduardo, but if you can convince me and Andy to vote for RFK Jr., you're golden. You can get anyone. So
we'll see what happens.
Good luck.
Well, even whatever it is, like this discussion will definitely reach other people. And even though we're always fighting the algorithms on YouTube, we still have on other platforms, 8 other platforms, and it's very important for people to make up their own minds. And I think that's what you'll bring to the table. So whatever we challenge you on is going to be a question that they probably have on Michael, and things that the recent interviews that Kennedy has had on. I would like to ask you about regarding everything. I will get there. We'll get there. But that's what this discussion is intended to for our audience as well. Anyhow, Andy, did you want to start off, or should I? Or
I guess I would say first, Michael, is there anything? What I heard you say is how he's shifting the narrative in the right direction, and that was what I heard most in terms of you being excited. And I heard very much how you are inspired. You feel very much like you need to make this vote. Is there anything else you want to say to our audience and to us about like why you've chosen to get so involved, really involved in his campaign?
Well, so I mean, I got the burn, like the Bernie burn. I got it. I got the Bobby burn. And so I'm like, oh, this is what people were talking about. When that whole thing happened, and so I definitely have that. Definitely idealistic in a lot of sense and such. And I think he is the Bernie of this election. We're seeing that. We're seeing excitement. We're seeing passion. We're seeing people get in their RVs and throw his face on it and go across the country. And not just one, like we're seeing this sort of energy that's very inspiring. But in terms of electoral politics, I think it's important that, like, for myself, I definitely used to be in a space of not believing in electoral politics at all. Totally believe electoral politics is fixed. There's numerous ways to fix electoral politics, but it's not always possible to fix electoral politics. The Democratic primary might be the most rigged election outside of a banana republic. Actually, it really might be. So and I'm aware of that. But in New York, as we were doing all of our organizing, one of the things I think we've all learned in America is just how important our governors are. After this COVID thing, all of a sudden we saw these governors making these little, especially in deep blue states, making these fiefdoms where all of a sudden no elected officials mattered, and you had a king or a queen that was doing this stuff. And we still push back in New York, thousands of us. And Andrew Cuomo gets dethroned. He gets through a Me Too scandal, even though the real scandal was the nursing home scandal, was all the thousands upon thousands of elderly folk that he was responsible for killing, for putting active COVID cases into the nursing homes. And just, it was very interesting because people thought he was untouchable, and that wasn't the case. He went down in basically a Me Too scandal. And then came Kathy Hochul, and she was this lieutenant governor that just ascends up because since he's gone, she has to take. And as she's coming into her first elected term here in New York, we're like, she's as bad or worse than Cuomo. And it got scary. And it got so scary, I did something I never did. I voted for a Republican. And not only did I vote for a Republican, I got out big time and volunteered for the Republican named Lee Zeldin. And we were in the streets with, pretty conservative, somewhat Trump-aligned Republican from New York, who we went to the Caribbean Day Parade in Brooklyn with him. We went to the African American Day Parade in Harlem with him. And there was people that were out with him you would never expect to be out with this guy. And he didn't win. But he came within 300,000 votes, which actually is it was the closest election in New York history in like the past 30 years. It's the closest that a Republican had came. But more importantly, what he did do is he carried 4 additional Republican seats on his back in New York, which ended up flipping Congress. And in New York, it is known and accepted for people that follow this, that medical freedom, the medical freedom vote played a big role in that, played a big role in Zeldin coming as close as he did, and in flipping 4 seats, including this guy, Mike Lawler, who they call him a dragon slayer. It's a term they use in Congress that if you're a rookie and you beat a real big bad opponent, and he did. He beat, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but the Democrat that controlled the purse strings for campaigns in New York. So effectively, this guy could have given himself as much money as he wanted, but still he lost. And he lost, it was a close margin. It was a few percentage points, but he lost. And one of the things we're seeing is that these Republicans are welcoming us in their offices. Recently, we had a scandal about this thing in New York City for New York City teachers called problem codes. And the problem code was put onto all unvaccinated teachers. Now, that problem code is the same code they put on teachers accused of pedophilia or beating a student. It was scarlet letter. And guess what? Makes it hard to find jobs. Some people couldn't get jobs because of that. Well, so through Children's Health Defense, when I worked with them, the then President Mary Holland wrote a letter to the New York Congress people, and the Republican delegation responded and wrote to New York City saying, you need to answer these questions. Pre-COVID, this is like unheard of. You know what I mean? During COVID, it was unheard of. But what I just learned in that process is, yeah, elections are rigged. Not every vote counts the way it should. But when you show up in force, you really can change things. If you can move a big group, a perfect example in South Brooklyn is turning red in New York City. And the reason why is they're having up to 65% voter turnout. That's crazy. That doesn't really happen. You have 20%, 30%, 40%. It's like, whoa, a lot of people come up. They have 65% of their voters coming out is a large Russian population, as it happens to be in South Brooklyn. And they're saying, we're not dealing with this. And you're seeing Democrats turn Republicans in South Brooklyn because they're realizing if I want to still be elected. So all of this stuff caught my attention. At first, I'm just a grassroots organizer. I'm just a fired teacher. I'm just pushing for medical freedom. I'm not getting this shot no matter what. Lost my job. So much was on the line, as all of us know. But then as I moved into these more political spaces, I was surprised that you can make a difference in this way through the vote. I don't agree with everything a lot of these people I went and campaigned for. I did not agree. Barely 50% of Lee Zeldin's platform, I probably agreed with. There was at least half of his platform, maybe more, I didn't agree with, but he was on point on medical freedom and what happened to us and being fired. So that's what got me excited. And then from out of nowhere, Bobby Kennedy throws his hat in the ring. And I don't agree with everything Bobby Kennedy's doing either, but it's way more than 50% in terms of what it is. So that got me very excited to be like, yeah, I can really kind of be all in on this one, despite some of the differences that I have with some of his platform.
Andy or Jess, or I could ask a question. You're mute.
Maybe just the one question I was going to ask you, and I think you might have answered it by saying you campaign with a Republican, was, would it have mattered to you? Would it have mattered to you if RFK Jr. had run as a Republican versus being as a Democrat? Would you still have gotten behind his campaign just to get
100%?
Yeah.
So 100%. The party meant nothing to me.
Right.
Means nothing to me. Actually, that's a whole interesting topic on its own in terms of who knows what's going to happen there. I have very little faith in Democratic primaries. We've seen, the Supreme Court has come out, not the Supreme Court, federal court has come out and basically said they're a private organization. I think the DNC's lawyer argued we can pick our candidates smoking cigars in the back room, because actually I think that's on record, that we're a private organization, and when they tried to appeal the Supreme Court wouldn't hear it. So I'm no fan of the Democratic Party, especially the DNC. It didn't matter to me. If he ran independent, I would be backing him as well too, because of how much of the platform I support.
That's it for me.
Well, I guess then let's get into RFK Jr. If you are to say he is, like, I for most people listening to us, we've gone through a very dramatic point where a lot of politicians were very giving up on, they just were all for this whole lockdown situation. A lot of them were, and he stood out, and he stood out, as you mentioned, in the things that he's done, and I was very much inspired, even just by the Children's Health Defense. I really was listening, pay attention. It was very hard to stay up to date with anything outside of the censorship of Google and anything that you were trying to look up online. And so now I see he is being villainized in the media around the conspiracists and the anti-vaxxer and all these things. What, if you could say to some of the NPR statements or the New York Times or anything that's being said about RFK Jr., what can you say that is a rebuttal to some of the things he has said, such as Wi-Fi causes cancer, or antidepressants are causing children to blame for school shootings, or anything around his appearance with Twitter, Elon Musk, and chemicals in water supply turning children to transgender? Like, these are the things that are coming up in the mainstream media, and I know this is going to come up. And now that you're working as part of this pack, I'm sure it's going to come up even for you. So I wanted to give you a chance to be able to rebuttal some of those things, if you may.
Yeah, I think the most important, well, being with the PAC, I'm not with the campaign, so I don't speak for the campaign.
All right, yeah,
we are separate efforts, but yeah, I think the number one thing is almost all of these statements are just lies. They're lies, they're fabrications, they're spinning things off. And that's one of the challenges I think Bobby's going to be facing, is how to get his very nuanced and detailed message out in the world of the 5-second soundbite, right? Because he doesn't really fit into that. He fits much better into a long form interview where he could talk for a long time and go through all the nuance. But there's just so many of these things where they come. He did not say that drugs are causing kids to go into these wild shooting rages. What he said is that there is indication that it might be involved, and we need to study it. Why isn't the NIH doing these studies? Why aren't they looking to see what else is involved in this? A very similar thing with talking about drugs, the turning children transgender. That's not what he said. What he referenced was a scientific study that talked about frogs that were exposed to a specific environmental toxin, and their genes were changing, and a few of them even did actually change their gender. This happened in a scientific study. And then he's then saying, we need to look at that in humans, because we know the same stuff is in humans, is in children now. So this type of, looking at science, coming up with questions, being inquisitive, and saying that the bodies like the NIH, the FDA, the CDC, a lot of which that taxpayer dollars go to, should answer these questions instead of just being front groups for big pharma, which basically they are at this point in time. So that's the first thing. I think that's largely what the mainstream media is doing. They're lying, or at least skewing things to a point to make him look crazy, or make him look like he's saying things he's not really saying. The next thing I would say is, this is the most fascinating thing to me. It seems to me the mainstream media and the mainstream Democratic Party now has a strategy that, okay, we can't really censor him. We will a little bit, but I mean, he's been on all the major platforms. Conservative media is bringing him on whenever they want, right? I mean, like Fox News, Newsmax, they're like, come on in. They're giving him wide audience to talk to. So the other stations kind of feel like, we need to do something here. They just want to focus on vaccines. And I think what they're betting on, it's a risky bet, is that if we just keep hitting the anti-vaxxer line, we're going to hurt him and we're not going to let him become a true candidate. He's going to be that single issue candidate. And most people think he's crazy on this vaccine issue. So let's just pound and pound and pound and pound on there. And then it's not even letting him get to the rest of his platform. I think that's a risky bet, though, post-COVID. I think you have a lot more people that are questioning and looking into it more. And now that they can find Bobby Kennedy easier, he's all over the place now, which blows my mind, right? I mean, a year ago he was nowhere, right? You just like you were saying, the algorithms and the censorship, we couldn't find him. We only knew if you followed his website and actually, we're in the loop. But now he's everywhere. So I think it's fascinating. Who knows if that strategy is going to work? I don't think it is going to work, and I think they're going to shift gears to something else. And I definitely don't underestimate the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, the national security state. As a whole as well too. The last thing I want to say on that is that a little on the side, but I believe the national security state wants to see Biden v. Trump too, like Rocky Tooth or like the sequel. I believe that's what they wanted to see. I believe those are the known entities. Even if Trump isn't completely in line with what the national security state agenda is, even if he can't be entirely controlled. I think he was controlled quite a bit. I think he fell in line to a lot of things. And I think that's what ultimately is desired. They want to see that pop up again. And I definitely don't underestimate, with their power and money and ability to whip up the propaganda machines and other things as well too. I don't underestimate that foe at all. They're extremely formidable. Yeah.
And Eduardo, I do want to get to like hearing from Jessica, myself, and then maybe let's see if Jessica has a question, and then let's hear Jessica make her case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with a whole lot of what you've said. So do we want to just jump in? Because I kind of want to like say our pieces and then hear your
Let's do it.
rebuttal. That's what
Great.
I want to. I'm just eager to kind of get to that.
Let's do it. That's
And
great.
I also want to know if Eduardo's planning to vote, and and if so, who for. Yeah, I mean, I guess in short, I'll try to be kind of concise. I'm not planning to vote, period, and I'm not planning to vote for RFK Jr. at this point. And I guess there's sort of like two overarching reasons why that's my current position. One is kind of like I guess like within the system, like the issues themselves, micro. So I can kind of touch on that. But then like the real reason is more of like the macro and how I view the system functioning overall. And yeah, like you mentioned the Bernie burn or the Bobby burn now, like I was a Bernie bro. I campaigned for Bernie not once but twice. And yeah, I just feel like, I mean, you'd completely acknowledged this, but like after what happened to Bernie in the last couple elections, I think anybody running as a Democrat specifically has pretty much like consented to an unfair fight and a stacked set of rules. And like the first time I was kind of willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess, maybe from a naive position. But after the second time, I was pissed. I felt really betrayed. I felt like my energy had been harvested, my money, my time. Yeah. So yeah, like within the system, like if I was gonna vote, like the issues that I would be assessing, Israel and Palestine, like I know that's kind of been in the media a little bit in terms of RFK's like some statements he's made and then backtracking and stuff like that. That was a huge red flag for me just because it's a really important issue, although I don't really think it's very surprising, like coming from somebody who's like a lifelong Democrat. But I mean, the vaccination issue, right? Like, as you said, Michael, gets the most attention. And I guess I'm in a maybe I'm in the minority in this sense, but I don't view RFK Jr. as anti-vax. I like you said, he actually has like a very nuanced position. For years, like he's been comparing the idea of like making safe vaccines, like getting mercury out of fish, right? Like that's like a comparison that he makes all the time. Which maybe like for a lot of voters, that would, if they were actually able to sit down and hear his stance, which is basically he wants safe vaccines. and like better oversight and better regulation, and he wants the harmful adjuvants out. Maybe for a lot of voters, like that would be a good thing. For me, like I'm actually anti-vax. For me, like he's not, even on that issue, if I was a single issue voter, like he's not radical enough for me. Everybody should read, I can never say his name. It's like Romeo Quijano, I think. He wrote this article in 2019, why vaccination is the most deceptive tool of imperialism, something like that. I forget the exact title. That article, along with like some other sources, was kind of my what made me shift from viewing vaccination as like a personal choice that if you want to get it, great. I don't want to get it, but that's fine, to being like truly anti-vaccination. And to me, like the fact that RFK is completely kind of, in my opinion, bought into the whole field of virology and just allopathic, like medical industrial complex paradigm in general. I don't think we need tighter FDA regulations or like safer vaccines. I just think the whole system is crock bullshit. So the vaccine like issue doesn't sway me. The climate stuff is a bit, I mean, like I've been a long time sort of environmentalist, and I know that's a label that is often applied to RFK and self-applied. But to me, like his history of sort of climate activism is actually a huge red flag as well. I think he's pretty much down with the whole climate agenda, environmental capture, like nonprofit industrial complex, which, I mean, he doesn't use the language of like SDGs and Agenda 2030 and all that kind of stuff, but you know, he knows his audience. He's a lawyer. He's not stupid, right? But to me, like, I don't see any evidence that he's not like down for all of the sort of fake green technological environmental solutions. I think we've talked about in Workers and Students for Choice, like how his partnership with Vantage Point, right? Like if you've read any of Alison McDowell's work, of course, like you understand how a venture capital firm like that one is just, you know, all tied up in human capital markets and impact investing and blockchain and carbon trading and financialization of nature, all, you know, all this sort of 4IR stuff that the freedom movement is like supposedly against, at least I'll just say like what's left has been critical of. So I don't know. I mean, I could go on with like more issues. To me, like I don't view it as like a purity test, but like I'm not saying RFK's never done anything good in his life. I admit, like I sometimes listen to him and I sometimes really like what he has to say. I will also admit to the fact that it can be really entertaining to see how like wildly the media and the mainstream politicians kind of freak out about his stances on certain stuff. But ultimately, like within that system, I do see him as like lesser of two, or I guess however many evils. And to me, it just feels like we've been here before. Yeah, it's not different, and I'm not like down to get sucked back into it. Then there's the sort of macro level, which is just the like I have come to see the whole system as being broken by design, right? And again, like kind of you acknowledged this, Michael, but yeah, like the House always wins. It's never the people. And I think the idea that like someone who's actually legitimately radical or like will disturb the current paradigm, political paradigm, could like A, get into the master's house, and B, that they would actually be able to change the system from within. To me, like that is an illusion. And I think like whether or not we vote, I don't think it's the people who will get to decide like how much of a platform RFK gets or like how far he goes in this primary race, because I don't view the elections as belonging to us. I think like if RFK is for us, there's no way he stands a chance. The DNC and just houses of power in general will cheat, right? Like in however many ways that they need to cheat in order to stamp him out. If he does actually get deep into the race or even get like a higher level of coverage besides just being smeared, which is what a lot of the coverage currently amounts to, that to me will be an indicator that he's not actually on our side, and or he's being kind of like weaponized to like sheepdog I basically have a shit ton of energy and organizing power, and people who might otherwise like completely reject electoral politics altogether right back into this system that kind of keeps them down. So yeah, I guess maybe I'll leave it there. Like, just I would throw out like the idea of him potentially being just a tool by which to like weaponize democracy, like democracy in quotations, and harvest our energy and attention and kind of distract us from stepping into real, like authentic self-responsibility, which to me means like walking away from the master's house and swimming across the river and like building a life and community and system that we actually want and deserve. Yeah. Okay. That's my that's my stump speech.
Very good. Fair enough, for sure. How do we want to do this?
I think,
Should I respond to that? Should I wait till you, Andy?
yeah,
Either way is fine with me.
you should respond as either
Okay.
questions or like respond any way you would like, given you're
Yeah.
very passionate about his candidacy.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to me, and then you'll respond, and then we'll go to Eduardo, and you respond,
Okay.
and then we'll see where we're
Like
at.
it's like high school debate team.
Yeah, a little bit. So, so Jessica, I think that's a fair and well thought out response. I think that's a place I've been most of my life. There's many elections I sat out. I didn't get into the electoral college system. Seems like a crock to me. There's a bunch of things. Like, I'm in New York, and it's like, blue or red, and it's like nobody cares about New York. New York is going blue. Like that's it. Like it's not so. On the national level, and I got more inspired by local level elections, because like one person, one vote seemed actually to be somewhat of a thing there. But in terms of your critique of Bobby Kennedy, by no means am I backing Bobby because I think he's a perfect candidate or a perfect person. And I don't think that anybody is, and I think that is something from a realist level, and 45-year-old me can get into, where when I was 25 I kind of couldn't. I wasn't able to see that, but I've seen him in 18 years make a lot of sacrifice because of some moms who had injured children that caught his ear with good science. Over 18 years, he's lost friends, he's lost business, he's lost esteem and prestige. And he's been censored horribly. He's had problems within his own family over this that are very real things. So I've seen him suffer in his own way for something that he believes in, and I am largely a single issue voter. The idea of medical freedom is too big. January of 2022. I mean, the moment for me was Austria made it illegal to walk the streets unvaccinated, and that was the real peak of all of this to me. And then that's also defeat the mandates, and it's the Canadian convoy, and then it all kind of backs down from there. But like, I remember where we can go, and probably are still headed in a different way, right? The vaccine game got kind of destroyed. They really the COVID is supposed to be the keys to the kingdom for the vaccine industry, and it's not. They really messed up. But we still have a digital fencing grid, and we have digital ID, and there's multiple ways that they're going to get this thing in, and they're working towards. I disagree with you in terms of Bobby Kennedy on environmentalism. I feel like COVID, and if you watch his narrative, I feel like COVID really changed him. I feel like I think you're correct. And if you want to look back in 2015, 2018 and earlier at some of the comments he made, I think he was very much very mainstream, non-profit environmentalism talk, carbon credits, and a whole bunch of other things that we definitely need to be very, very wary of. But now, currently, when you hear him speak, and I don't at all think that this is just rhetoric, I think COVID really made him rethink everything about this. He is not into environmentalism or climate change weaponized against the middle class and the working class. He's not into that. He does believe global warming is a real thing, that there's real science to it, and we need to pay attention to that. But he does not believe we need to slaughter animals and take farmers' lands from them in order to deal with this. He doesn't believe that we need a Green New Deal that includes sensors all over the place, taking all of our data and having a whole surveillance system from smart meters to our toaster, right? He does not believe in those things. And I feel he's made statements to that, and I believe he will continue to. And I feel very confident that that's not the direction. He does believe in renewable energy. I think a lot of what he says there is, and the main thing he says about that is he believes free market capitalism, take away subsidies, and free market capitalism will determine what's the best energy source. That subsidizing the nuclear industry, subsidizing the fossil fuel industry is the wrong way to go. Let it be a true free market. He does believe in free markets, I tend to, I don't know 110% what I think there, but I'm not dogmatic on that. I think there are times that the state needs to be involved, and I think there are times that you do need to have free markets. My favorite free market is the farmers market. So I am open to a lot of different things, and then also in terms of that. I've been reading Bobby's book, American Values, which is about the history of his family. I think it was published 2018, I believe, and just learning a lot about the history of his family. And you can see a lot of his policies go back to, he's obsessed with his family and knowing what his family did and such. And his grandfather was the first SEC chairman. When the SEC was first started, his grandfather was in that position with FDR and made a lot of big industry enemies, especially in the oil industry, but in other places as well too. And Bobby has this firm view that these regulatory agencies must limit the greed and the incessant growth of free market capitalism. And that's what they need to be there, but they've been captured. And that's the one piece he knows better than anybody else. He knows how the EPA has been captured. He knows how the CDC, the FDA, NIH has been captured. And I believe he can come in and dismantle that. I don't know if he could dismantle the military-industrial complex. I don't know if he could dismantle the CIA, as his uncle famously said, smash it into a million pieces and scatter it to the winds. I don't know if that's even possible. I mean, because the CIA is like a nation within a nation. In my opinion, it has its whole own thing. And I think Bobby has. I agree with Bobby very, very much on the Ukraine war. I think he's really got his finger on the pulse of what to do there and what's going on there. But I realistically, I don't know if he can dismantle some of the worst facets of the system. And Jessica, I think you have a good point there. But I do think he can dismantle a lot of this bureaucratic technocracy, especially in the health space. He knows it so well. He's litigated it for such a long time. I think that really does have to do with firing people, bringing new people in, getting the industry people out. And I am extremely excited about what that could mean if he is able to come in and do that. And I think there's other areas where he's not going to be able to make big changes, or I don't see it myself. I think the biggest point that you made, that's a valid point, I still struggle with, I go back and forth, is on the deep-seated corruption of the American system, of capitalism, of global capitalism, of the NWO, whatever you want to, I don't really like that term, but it doesn't matter. Globalism, whatever it is. I don't like this idea of I don't vote because we must take down the system. And then what are we doing to do that? If you're not doing something there, I feel like the idea of going and voting on one day is I'm not asking that much from people. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not telling you to dedicate your whole life to this like me necessarily, but I do think if voting didn't matter at all, why would they spend all this time, money, and resources to suppress the votes that they want to suppress, to brainwash people, to cause real election manipulation and blame it on Russia and all this shit that they do? If our one vote really truly didn't matter, why are they doing that? They steal elections, but Democrats, Republicans, national security state, they all are involved. There's no purity here. There's no party. I mean, even I believe even the Greens have been accused of like rigging their primaries and stuff. So they're all dirty in some sense. Absolutely, for sure. So I just don't know that we revolt against the system by dropping out of it and letting it play out the way they want it to play out. If you have another whole grassroots agenda that you want to sell to me about what we can do now, I want to hear it. Like, I'm down to hear that. But I don't think that also means stay home and don't go and vote on this one day, or on these one day a year, or one day every other year, or whatever the case is. I think we can do that and also plan a revolution. I think we could do that and also have other efforts. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I don't see that I'll tell you this, if Bobby Kennedy doesn't get the nomination and he drops out on election day in 2024, I'm going with my son next to me and I'm writing Bobby's name in, and that's what I'm doing. It's just important to me on a big level, and I can do that, and I can still get with you guys and plan other revolutions and plan other things and do other things as well too. I don't think it's one or the other ultimately.
I would say, Jessica, do you want to respond to that or have a response to it? Yes or no? And then if not, I'll just go to my part.
Yeah, but I'm worried. I'm worried. I don't want to take up too much time because I
do
feel
at
like
least one.
go back and forth.
No,
Only
do
to
it.
say this, like, to the first half, like, about the positive changes that he potentially could make. To me, like, that would require him to win, which I get. Like, you're trying to get enough votes, enough people to vote that would become a reality. But I just don't think that that's possible, because I don't think the DNC would let it be possible. And I'm not saying I would like 100% be down to vote, but if he had run as an independent and like rejected the framework of the Democratic Party, that would pique my interest at the very least.
Jessica, can I ask, if he loses in this and then he runs as an independent, what would you think about that?
I think at this point, I still wouldn't vote, but it would definitely, be a difference that would be worth considering.
Okay.
All right. Maybe, should I go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to like.
Yeah, this has been helpful so far, Michael, and I'm hoping we don't have a 3-hour episode, but we'll see. I think we'll just do this and then we'll cut it, and then maybe if we want to come back to this discussion, we can do that later if you have time, because I suspect you'll be very busy. So I think, let me say a few things I heard that are areas we differ. You talked about kind of being a single issue person around the medical freedom, and I am not a single issue person, and I'm not just talking about capitalism. And I agree, you're a critic of capitalism, but if I was going to say there's an issue, it's capitalism has to go, and there must be a revolution. But if I was going to host the single issue we're facing right now as facing capitalism, it's not medical freedom. It's the fourth industrial revolution. It's data collection. It's AI. It's blockchain. It's Bitcoin. It's surveillance. And I actually see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Currently, I see him as very much a person who can help bring in the fourth industrial revolution, support Bitcoin, support surveillance on the border, and making sure that people don't get across the border when he called for massive surveillance. So I already see that, in my opinion, RFK Jr. is down with all the fourth industrial revolution that is going, the attack on our medical freedoms is a piece of, because it's only one part of the plank for what they have involved in getting us into a giant technocratic prison. That's the first thing. The second thing is I'm really glad you brought up Bernie, because I don't think elections have a giant reason for the capitalist class. Elections are very important to them. They are giant in ideological interventions into the class as a way of saying, come back home all the time. Come back home. If you want change, come back to us. And Bernie Sanders is a perfect example. After the WTO demonstrations, after the attack in Iraq and Afghanistan, after the attack on immigrants, after a lot of the brutality we had seen, police brutality, there was a massive amounts of anger that Bernie tried to collect and successfully brought it back into the Democratic Party and diffused it. And you can say, yeah, oh, just vote for that one day. That's not how it works. People got their hopes up, and Bernie did exactly what he was intended to do, is get people to not think about transforming the system fundamentally, but getting them to think, come back into the system and come back and think, maybe we can make that change. And it had a giant ideological impact, which now we have a left that supports a war in Ukraine. And I'm not just blaming Bernie, but that is the inversion. He created that those sorts of processes that of people.
Wait, hey, Andrew, is Bernie currently a supporter of the Ukraine war?
Yeah, I mean, he supports it. He supports the bills that, yes, and now that's where they go. A whole new generation has come up that has made this left-right thing. And let's talk about the current, the mandates, the lockdowns, the massive attack on workers that you faced and that I faced. I lost my job as it is from it as well. We have a whole new generation of people who I think who came to the conclusion that the government hates them, they're right, that the state hates them, they're right, wants to kill them, and is willing to kill their children and willing to sacrifice them for their profits and for pushing whatever agenda they need to push. Something against the MWO, I would just call it profits and capitalism. But whatever it is, there was a massive number of people and a growing number of people who, based on their own experience, were coming to see this system has nothing for me. I'm going to exit and build. I'm out of here. We're going to do the whole new thing. RFK Jr., his reason for running, the role he's going to play. I don't know Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I think you better know but the role he's going to play within the system is to get those people to say, no, come back. Here's your guy. It's fine. Yeah, we made some mistakes, but now we've got a guy who's going to tell you that, well, the pandemic was mismanaged. I think that there was no pandemic. And now we're going to tell you, guy, there's a lab leak. Oh, I'm saying I'm not even sure there was a fucking virus in the first place. I think virology has got a giant problem. Terrain theory makes more sense to me than, and I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running they're going to shape the debate and basically say, here's where we go. And frankly, the one position he had that I thought was the biggest reason I liked RFK Jr. is he made me anti-vax. He was part of me becoming anti-vax. I was just against the COVID vax before, but him and others convinced me, fuck these things, where they're all gone. The fact that I haven't followed his campaign too closely, but most of the things he's been saying, or at least his campaigners have been saying, oh, he's not anti-vax. He should be anti-vax. Be anti-vax. Stand up for the one thing you convinced me of. So to me, he's very much positioning himself already, like Sanders, to be change light, which really isn't change light at all. It's actually no change at all. It's actually, here comes this, we're going to defang the resistance that could have been built, the Canadian resistance, the yellow jackets, the yellow shirts, that kind of resistance.
Yellow vest.
Defang those people and prepare them for the next round of attacks. That's what, I don't think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. thinks of himself that way, but that's the role he's going to play in the system by running. What I would have wanted him to say is I ain't running. I'm not voting in this system. This system hates you. I'm going to stay doing what I'm doing to change this system, and you should do the same thing. If he would have done that, then I would have been like, I'm all in with you, RFK Jr., because you're not running. And I wouldn't vote for him whether he's like Cornel West is running a third-party candidacy. No, Cornel, get the hell out of there. Stop doing that. All you're doing is giving the system a facelift and saying people like me can tell you it can change. And as in terms of the narrative, the narrative that he's going to affect is the narrative that the Democratic Party is a party that can be changed and work for us. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to really, and he's even resuscitating his John F. Kennedy Jr. John F. Kennedy Jr. nearly destroyed the planet in a war, right, over Cuba, right? John F. Kennedy Jr. maybe sent 16,000 soldiers over to Vietnam to fight a war over there, and said, I don't want to escalate the war, but you certainly should kill Diem. John F. Kennedy Jr. didn't want to necessarily fight a war down in South America, but and for all of him talking about CIA being destroyed, no, he weaponized the CIA to go down there and kill those people down in South America and actually, make the elections go the way they wanted to in Chile and other places, and El Salvador and Guatemala. So frankly, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s own history of what he knows his uncle did, I find extremely suspect. I don't agree with it, but I do see what it does is resuscitates Democratic Party. It resuscitates the U.S. as an empire. That's what he's going to do is basically look at those glory days back when we fought good wars. What? We never fought good wars. We were, in my opinion, all those wars were wars of empire, were wars of money and wars of profit. And I get it. He's not an anti-capitalist, but I'm not going to vote for him for that reason. And frankly, I can't vote for him because all he's doing is resuscitating the Democratic Party, resuscitating the U.S. empire, and really defanging the one hope we have, in my opinion, which is that people would say, no, not even for one day am I voting. They want to get you, oh, just wear the mask today. Just do the shot today. It's always one day with those motherfuckers. No days, 0 days. You've had all the days you get. From now on, it's our day, and you don't get 1 day to get the vote. Now, I believe that you will maintain yourself as an activist. But I'm telling you, I believe that the terrain is being laid by, again, in this election, for everyone to forget all the horrible things that were done, and the narrative spinning that, oh, the system's trying to figure it out. Look, RFK, he's being mistreated, he's being poorly treated, and they're censoring him. But look, there's a fight up there that we should be paying attention to. And there's no fight up there. All those people up there, including RFK Jr., are interested in ultimately, if they're interested, they're going to be part of collecting our data, the fourth industrial revolution, Bitcoin. He was a big supporter of Bitcoin. That means he's a supporter of blockchain. And when he talks about basically making sure we surveil our borders with all sorts of mainstream modern technology, that's a surveillance operation. And if it's going to be used on immigrants, it's going to be used on workers. So he should have no illusions about that. So I think the best thing people could do is say, sorry, dude, I'm out. I'm not voting for you. I'm not voting for Cornel West. I'm not voting for anybody, not one day. We're going to have to figure out our own strategy here. And that's kind of what I'm putting out in terms of what's left. What that strategy is, honestly, I don't know. But I believe it has to basically seal itself off like an iron wall from anything that they're talking about. Because all they're doing is what the guy, the CIA head of Woolsey basically said, that we will know our CIA operation is complete when everything the American people believe is a lie. And he was not exaggerating. I thought he was exaggerating. It turned out he wasn't. And now RFK, by running, has really said, I'm part of that, not part of this. And what's going to happen is there's going to be very little change in the system. But what I will say, it's going to change for the worse, the ideas and the preparations people need to be making for the kind of revolutionary change we need to make. And that's why I think that's why I was disappointed that he ran. I'm not even going to vote for him. I was disappointed that he ran because I felt like he can do better staying out and even saying people don't go in there. Only bad things happen when you go there.
So one of the initially right now, I believe one of the big differences between Bernie and Bobby is Bobby was asked, will you commit to supporting the Democratic nominee? And he said, no, absolutely not. Why would I do that? He said, let's see who's committed to free and fair debates and to democratic principles. And we could talk about this another time. That's not what Bernie did. Bernie was totally a shepherd. I would be shocked if Bobby endorses Joe Biden in any meaningful way. Bernie stumped for Hillary and Biden, I think, right? Isn't that actually what happened? He stumped for them. He went out there, he stumped for them.
Yes.
I don't think you're going to see that from Bobby. Whether or not he endorses someone, I don't know. If you watch the congressional hearings of Bobby, the Democrats, they've lost their minds. I mean, it's not a surprise. They are completely insane. And they spent a long time working hard on televised TV to censor Bobby in this committee on censorship. During the censorship committee, they had a vote. Let's censor him. Let's censor him now. Let's not censor him. It does have a big spectacle feel to it. I will admit that it does feel like really does feel like I'm watching the circus. So I do respect that. And I do understand that. But when you bring up Jack Kennedy again, and I don't think John F. Kennedy was a perfect president. But one of the things that Kennedy did was he installed in his home a direct line to Khrushchev, and him and Khrushchev had direct talks. And one of the things that they had very specific spies that they trusted that delivered hand-delivered messages back and forth. And they realized we cannot trust the psychopaths around us. You're dealing with real potential nuclear war, and some people in the national security state on both sides believed it was a good thing. And I do believe, from my read of history, that John F. Kennedy played a major role in preventing that when he had a very dangerous group of, and I think psychopaths is the correct word. And this is a very dangerous thing. We have very psychopathic, crazy people in positions of power and authority that can and do destroy things at will and at liberty. And I think that's an important thing for us to recognize, because while the system could be corrupt and imperfect and horrendous, it's the system that runs things, that is running the world for billions of people. So to have a person that can be there in critical moments to do good things, I think is something that matters, is something that is important. And in my mind right now, I think Bobby can do that in terms of increasing the health and life expectancy of children and adults, decreasing the dependency on pharmaceutical products. One thing he might come in on day one, if he won, and do, is end pharmaceutical advertising in the country. That alone, there's only 2 countries that allow it, New Zealand and America. And that alone could have a shocking effect on the health and well-being of people in this country. And that's just one of many things that I think he's able to do. You also brought up the security state. I think this is an important issue. And on the border, this is a tough one for me. I've been an immigrants' rights activist for a year. I've worked directly with undocumented youth that I know. Many who I have, have had relationships with them and their families, just come to know them. I've helped to get immigration attorneys for undocumented kids in New York City that were facing deportation, or who parents were facing deportation. And when people are like, say things like, lock up all these illegals and whatever, illegals, this like ridiculous, to me, it's a ridiculous term. I always wonder, have you had lunch with an undocumented person? Have you ever taught an undocumented child? I have, and it's a different issue for me. So it's an issue that resonates with me. But I do also see clearly there is an agenda to flood this country with people from all over the world who have various really tough lives and problems and issues, and for whatever reason view America as the solution to those problems. But a nation state can't exist like that. Nations have borders. So if we are going to exist in a world of nation states, I believe there should be a border, and I believe our legal immigration process should be robust and should be expanded upon, which that's what Bobby is saying right now. In terms of the technology, the surveillance, you're right. He did say that. I did recently hear that he went down there and he spoke to the people that were there, and they did speak about completion of the wall, but also various technologies that can be used. I'm not sure how I feel on that. I haven't really analyzed that issue much, but it is definitely something we have to watch out for. I feel Bobby has spoken out a lot about civil liberties and freedom, and our freedom to be able to move and to control our data. And at Children's Health Defense, we've reported on this extensively. It's something we're covering and we recognize is a crucial and critical issue. And that's the nonprofit that I used to work for and that Bobby founded. So I don't think he's going to go in a direction of trying to enable and fortify that system. And the Bitcoin thing is an interesting one because he's come out completely against CBDC, central bank digital currencies. He is against that. Biden is clearly for it. Clearly, that's something that they want, that like they're salivating for that. That's probably one of the next things that they want. That will be one of the worst. Bobby is clearly against it, but he is in support of Bitcoin and people having the right to utilize Bitcoin. I personally don't have a problem with that. I know many people do have a problem with Bitcoin. I'm not exactly sure what the perfect answer is on that. I don't think it should be more regulated. I don't think that it should be abolished. I don't know, the genie's out of the bottle there. It's something that exists in our world, that exists in our economy. I don't see how we stop it. I think keeping that a free market, as opposed to going the direction they really want to go to the CBDCs, I personally don't see too much of a problem with that. And one day, just one day, and harnessing the energy, I can understand the fear in that. Bernie definitely did it twice, and I do understand not wanting to get caught up, having your energy harvest and put into a specific direction, like Hillary Clinton, like Joe Biden. I do get that's a horrible thing. I don't know where this goes. I don't know where Bobby's candidacy goes. I really doubt it goes into a Joe Biden endorsement and he's holding Joe's hand up in the air. And I mean, Bernie did all that stuff, right? I mean, Bernie was out there, campaigning. I don't see that happening. If it did happening, it would be a huge disappointment for sure. And I guess I wouldn't be backing him as strong as I am if I suspected that was going to be what happened. I'm not as strongly and firmly against the system as you are, Andy, because the system is running the world right now. And I don't want to just give up on the world and try to think about a revolution. I've gone to eco villages. I've covered them as a reporter. I've thought about moving to them. I've talked to people that grow their own food and what that is. Ultimately, if we're going to live anywhere near the way we live now, civilization needs to maintain. If we're going to talk about a real power down type of situation, I was involved very much well, I mean, I guess could be called the peak oil movement back in like the late 2000s, early to late 2000s. And a lot of people were talking about like the end of oil and stuff, which I think is a very real thing we need to think about. But just in general, about overconsumption and overuse and just plastic crap, everything, everywhere, and just, consumption society. That's going to require a true evolution and revolution of spirit, I think, before anything else. I don't want to I don't think it's possible to just abandon this system. I think all of us are relying on to find sustenance and to stay alive and to see our families and communicate with each other, even this platform that we're on now. So I don't want to just abandon the system, which is feels to me like abandoning civilization. And I don't have something else. And the lifeboats I've examined to hop onto, I don't see how they actually function and work from my own research. Now, maybe people have done more research and have seen, and there's more that I don't know of. And I'll just end by saying I'm certainly interested in other revolutions, in non-electoral revolutions, in things that do buck the system and create new systems and create new organic grassroots change. But I do need to see it. We do need some leadership there. Or maybe I'm just blind to it. Maybe I need people to educate me on that.
Maybe I'll just give one response then.
Great.
I would say, well, first off, I think this cycle that the American working class has gotten itself into, and particularly the addiction to the Democratic Party and the addiction to electoral politics, has done a lot to, well, has done immense damage to the possibility of workers saying we need to build something of our own. And it looks like we got another round coming when I thought we were actually kind of getting free of it. And that's one of the frustrations for me, and why I'm disappointed that RFK Jr. is running. I'll probably just bring up the issue of immigration. And you did cite, like, we have a difference in terms of, like, a critique of capitalism, but hey, I'm not sure we should get rid of it. And I think capitalism is the problem, not just, and that it is anti-civilization, actually. And that we're going to have to, humans are going to have to find a way of building something as an alternative, and we will probably have to fight to defend that if we are successful. But that is the only way that I see forward for humanity. As you know, the Earth will be fine, but for humanity, I don't see a way forward maintaining this thing that I think is very antithetical to civilization, which is the system we live under. But I do believe immigration, for me, is kind of a key, because I've been talking to people who are often conservative, who are opposed to passports, who are opposed to passports of going into Starbucks or passports going into work, and saying to them, this is the same thing they're doing with the border. This is the same mechanism of control. They've just gotten you to buy into it using a national boundary that is made up, that really only works for them, and that's how I talk about it. And so I believe, Michael, by going down this road of saying, hey, maybe we need to control these people who are coming into our country, and seeing them as the problem, versus the wealth division that really all this immigration, I mean, not the only reason, but one of the major reasons immigration is coming up again is, again, to mask the wealth inequality that has gotten even crazier and crazier. That's its not only role, but it's a major role it's doing, is to divert people from that sort of thing. So hordes of people coming in, I don't call that a problem. I say that's people we organize with. I say that's people we try to figure out, how do we take the system down, because it's the system here that destroyed your country over there, that made it necessary for you to come here and leave your loved ones. So help us out. And immigrants have a long history in this country of building organizations to fight for a different kind of world. They were unsuccessful, but they have a history of doing that. So I would say that to walk down that road of, maybe we do need to do something about our border, you are already walking down the road of accepting passports that way, and surveillance and the tech that goes with it. And that's exactly the role that I see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doing, which is seducing people into taking positions that ultimately hurt our cause and hurt us. And I kind of feel like that's an example of one of those issues that's done it in your case. That's not going to decide, you deciding that, or you taking that position isn't going to decide the fate of immigrants. But I'm just kind of using that as a way, as how I believe people are seduced away from politics that are pro-worker and pro-internationalism and pro-revolution, and seduce them into a narrative that is anti-worker, completely that the system can use to control us, basically. And that's what I would call that example of.
Just the one thing I want to respond on, I agree with you on, is immigration crisis is almost, I think you can always draw that back to the root of American imperialism destroying countries. Almost always. I mean, there's other things too, but Honduras comes to example years ago. Mel Zelaya, right, was a democratically elected left-leaning leader of the country, overthrown by a CIA coup. The country's destroyed. In come all the drug running. In come all the horrible stuff. People are, leaving Honduras, running up, coming for the border, trying to come into the country. I view that as actually the cause of the crisis. You have to stop that, and then you can deal with what would be much more sustainable and normal, natural human migration. So I think we agree on that, and I think Bobby Kennedy ultimately does as well too, with the crux of that.
Eduardo, I'm really curious to hear what this guy's going to say.
Let's wrap up, as we're trying to wrap up with this last one, Michael, and then you'll have the last word, Michael. I think I've said this before in other episodes on What's Left, that I think voting could be sometimes useful. For example, on especially local politics. I especially saw that when we were trying to have certain reservations, certain environmental areas, protected land, where people would not be abusing it, or even just federal money trying to preserve a certain area of land that I thought was important. Otherwise, you have animals that are only endemic to this region. Well, I'm not in California. I'm in Colombia, but when I'm in California, that's where I vote, and I will try to protect certain places. I've often said on What's Left that I don't know if I could join a revolution if I have nothing to what do I have to say? What do I have to say for? What do I want? Like, in your heart, you have to be able to stand up for something. And if everything's gone, I feel like I will not be able to stand up for anything if everything's gone and lost and we don't take care of what we have at this time. And I haven't seen a revolution train at this moment, and I would love to jump on one. But if there isn't one, then at this time, I'll just have to continue patching the holes of a sinking ship until there is one. There's a better ship. That's the way I've always framed this. And so I have voted locally. It isn't until recently that I decided to not vote for election, like the presidency elections or any big federal elections. And I think this is an interesting case here, because when you say that Bobby is not going to be endorsing, well, that's what you would be very surprised if he did endorse Joe Biden. I would be disappointed myself as well. I think in the conversation that I try to hijack the conversation when we have electoral these elections, because that's where everybody's mind and energy is into right now, right? That's where we are. And so what better way to talk about politics than to talk about it during the election season? That's what I always say. And so I think that this is always an experiment in the way that our democracy works, even though I have a lot of doubt that our democracy really is working. I do admire RFK Jr.'s stance. I think it's very hard, as you know, Michael Kane, I think I expressed this to you, to be someone that's going to be anti-lockdown or anti-COVID restrictions, because people will shut you down. And as they did in my community when I was speaking up in San Francisco and I was a person of color, and still I was not the right person of color, right? Then suddenly you are to be dismissed. And then I saw the woke left's hypocrisy of that, right? Where they really only try to use people of color, and everyone in SF, and no one will say this, as if San Francisco Unified School District has said that only white families wanted to come back, which was not true, because kids of color, families of color came back in droves, and they have never walked back and stated they made a mistake or anything. And they're all over social media having said constantly that white families are the only ones that wanted to come back, when Black and brown families were the ones in these hubs in San Francisco. Anyhow, I'm just trying to remind people of the hypocrisy that happens in liberal circles when you use identity politics, right? And so back to the censorship, back to the shunning. My Jehovah's Witness background has been traumatizing, and then the liberal left, progressive left, was also very traumatizing in the way that they shunned me. And I was speaking out in Telemundo and speaking out in SF Chronicle and trying to have people reopen schools for my community, Latinos, and teachers felt that it was a threat, so I was shut out. So I've always admired RFK Jr.'s stance, and I've always admired you, Michael, really, to be honest, and just people being authentic and saying what they mean and being out there. And I believe in your sincerity. I do believe in your sincerity, Michael. When you do become someone of, I've said this to Andy, who was going to be running for vice presidency. No, who ran as vice president for my former union, SFUSD, a union which is United Educators of San Francisco. I always said that once you get into power, though, I do feel there is sort of you get sucked into a way of maybe I don't know if corruption is the word. Maybe you get distracted, or you just probably start losing touch with the base, which is us, the working class folk, and that's what I've always feared. And I always would hold people to the fire, like I do now with my former friends who are in the union, who are now elected and who are at this point public figures. So I'm just kind of concerned about that piece, and I wonder if RFK Jr. had considered running as an independent. Maybe you can answer that now, Michael. Do you know
if he will run?
If he had considered running as an independent?
in the beginning of this, he always wanted to run in the Democrat Party. And he believes that in America today, and I'm pretty sure he's believed this for at least a decade, probably much more, that you can't make big change in America without the Democrat Party. There's just too many of them. You can't just abandon them and just say, well, we'll go Republican, we'll get them, or we'll go independent or some combination. I think part of what he's doing is recognizing that if we don't have an insurgency and kind of a revolution in the Democrat Party, that there's no change that can be made. I don't mean to speak for him because I really can't.
Right.
But from what I've gleaned, from what I've seen, that's what I think his position is.
I see. All right. Well, I guess that to me I would have liked to have seen a sort of Ralph Nader sort of approach, maybe sort of to see what would that have been like. You know, I was saying with Jess and Andy that, you know, Al Gore always famously said, I was robbed of the votes. And Ralph Nader always said, no, I was robbed of the votes.
But I think, I mean, his family history is like such a point of pride for him. Like, I don't know. I hear him say that all the time. Like, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat. So I don't think I would not expect that.
That's true.
Question of who is going to run. At least
I want to. I guess the other thing too, Michael, is just I'm a little undecided. That's to be honest, because I don't know if I can have Jess and Andy's position in the very etched way, because I'd like to always throw in a few cards to see what happens into the mix, so it doesn't really hurt me if I just voted for him or not. I will say though, if Michael, you ever get in touch, or because if you'll be around those circles, you should bring up. Excuse me, there's a plane overhead. I'm in Bogota, Colombia. I'm very near the airport. It's so loud. And if you ever do, you'll be in the same circles around the campaign folk. I would love for you to really question and to confront the issue of immigration. I'm in Colombia, and in Colombia, you know, by the end of 2022, 2.5 million Venezuelans have completed pre-registration here in Colombia, which is a smaller country than the USA. And that's also with 1.6 million in possession of a temporary protection permit. That's a lot of Venezuelans in Colombia. If Colombia could do it, which is a very small country, the USA can certainly do it. And that's where I felt like even his comment about closing those on the borders, I just think controlling anybody's way of movement is a lot of what Alison McDowell talks about. And that's what I fear. And you know, for someone who has been on the ground, and I have been to 30 different countries and traveled as a Mexican, right? Like talking to other people who have to migrate, and people from my family also coming from immigrant family, and my friends who I've had to help and support go through the process of immigration and picking them up from the border, taking them to the north, from a southern border and taking them to the northern border, experiencing like bribery and danger. And then Venezuelans, especially like my Venezuelan friends, they're at the same level of displacement as Ukrainians, but only Ukrainians were given permission to come into the USA. But the UN has said that the displacement is at the same level, Venezuelans and Ukrainians, and only you can see where the international support has gone to, right? So to me, open borders is a very important issue. So I trust in your sincerity, Michael. I really do. And I hope that if you ever are in that, like, in close contact with their campaign, you do bring up the issue, because I know that you know that this is an issue that is important, especially as a teacher who've worked with immigrant families, that it could be difficult for us to hear it in the way that he did say it, you know.
That's a very good point, Eduardo. It even surprised me to hear his framing. His framing was very far away from what I think the Democrat framing of the issue of immigration often is, and came off quite conservative. His framing did come off as a very conservative. What I think, and I hope, and I don't know, I've never spoken to Kennedy about this. There's a lot of people, especially conservatives, that want to close the border, that want to decrease or make zero people that come in. And I do not think that's what Bobby Kennedy is talking about at all. I think what he's talking about is that there needs to be a correct process for it to happen, where you have a legal documented process by which it happens, as opposed to ending up with millions of undocumented immigrants in this country with a date to meet in court in 7 years, which is what's currently happening. That's what the system is. It's kind of a broken system. So, but I do appreciate your comments about the framing of it, because I think you make a good point. The way he framed it, the way he spoke to it, did surprise me as well too. It wasn't what I was expecting, for the way I was expecting him to bring the issue up.
Right. Well, I think as we're wrapping up here, this is it'll be an interesting election season with Robert Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy. Did you say it was Burn, Bobby?
I got the Bobby Burn. Yeah,
I got the Bobby Burn.
I do. I definitely have the Bobby Burn. I can't lie about that. Yeah.
Throwing Bobby into this mix is definitely going to challenge the Democrats, and we'll see. I don't know if someone as rogue and is always being ignored in the mainstream media, and you know what happened with Bernie and the Democrat convention is just completely trying to just dismiss him constantly.
Oh, yeah.
So I see that happening. I don't know if it can realistically happen, but I
Can
also
I ask a question about that?
Go ahead, Jess.
Maybe it's a good wrapping up question.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to cut you
As
off.
we're wrapping up, yeah.
On that exact point, I'm just wondering. Obviously, Michael, you want RFK Jr. to win, but
Yes.
if he doesn't, which I think is the likely scenario, I don't think the system will allow him to win, no matter how much public support he has. What's your sort of best case scenario if he loses? Is it I hear a lot of people who still sort of stand Bernie saying well, yeah, he lost, and yeah, it was rigged, but it shifted the parameters of allowable discussion and blah blah blah. Is that kind of what you would see us gaining, or what?
So no, it's a good question. First off, I'm already excited about what we've gained already. I mean, what the discussion he's already put out there is already beyond what I thought was going to happen. So I'm already giddy over what I've already seen. So that's just me. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on that. I'm already oh my God, I can't believe it's this good. But this is the real thing. This is the real thing. It's not the presidency. Every true politically powerful movement in this country basically has three things. You have a powerful nonprofit, powerful national nonprofit, or a couple of them, powerful super PAC, and a network of C4s. So C4s are a C3 is a nonprofit that you could give tax deductible donations to. A C4 is essentially a political arm. They especially lobby in the state houses. What I just described to you, the NRA has, and the DSA has. So whether it's the NRA on the right or the Democratic Socialist of America on the left, that's what they have. They have powerful nonprofits, they have major super PAC, and they have a network of C4s. Medical freedom is moving in that direction. And when you have that, that's when they have to listen to you. That's when you have a level of power and push that you can really have national impact. So for me, I'm watching that for medical freedom more than anything else. And right now I'm speaking as myself, Michael Kane. I'm not speaking on behalf of what I work. But to me, medical freedom as a movement has gone from, and I've seen it, I've been in it before COVID. We've gone from a fringe thing where they just said there's these crazy soccer moms who don't know what happened to their kids and they're just crazy, to now we're almost this major national movement. I'm paying. That is actually the most interesting element of things that I'm watching. In terms of the presidential race, we'll see. I'm 100% Bobby right now, and I think he has moved the narrative. We'll see what happens, but the president isn't the only thing. That's where I'm putting my effort in right now. But grassroots activism and organizing around medical freedom is my passion, and in a certain sense, it's a godsend that I'm not a teacher anymore, because now I am in this space, and I didn't see it coming. I thought I was going to retire as a teacher and, all that stuff. But here we are. So, politics is a multidimensional thing. I'm learning more about it every day. I'm learning more now than I ever have. And, yeah, so I guess I don't know exactly, Jessica, but that's where my mind is at, kind of in my learning process and my growth curve here as an activist. Yeah.
Michael, you're here as our guest. You should close out with what you want to tell our audience.
This was awesome. This was a great conversation. I love you guys. I love talking to you. I think we have a lot more what's lefties nowadays thinking our way than when I first met you. I think we were a smaller contingency when everybody was huddled in the corner with their mask on and just like cleaning their hands and stuff like that. I think we really have come past that. I think we still need retribution, and we need payback for all those who have suffered and all the workers who are attacked so viciously. But I really do think that, like, we're not as fringe as we once were. People are either realizing we have very valid points to make and to say, or they're shutting up and they're just not saying their opinions. I think we're now more of the majority. And man, what an amazing thing that was. Because God, in like 2021 and 2022, I was so scared. It was such a scare. It was the scariest time as an American, as a New Yorker, I think I ever witnessed, and the thing that's always, and I feel freer now. I feel better now, but it's in the back of my head. I know it could come at any moment. It could come and it's going to come from a different direction. Like, people keep saying there's going to be another pandemic. They're going to do it again. I don't think so. I mean, I remember after 9/11, people said that there's going to be another attack. And that's not what happened. It comes a different way. You know what I mean? So I guess I stay vigilant because of that. But I'm not gonna leave the fact that I'm happy. I'm proud of all of us, of what we've done, and that we've held the line. We continue to hold the line, and whatever you decide, or whoever you decide to vote for, we do still have some freedom here, and a lot of that came from us pushing back and saying no and speaking freely and making our own choices when everybody thought that was revolutionary to speak and to make your own choices. So it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with you guys, and I hope soon we'll get back together and do it again and see where our opinions are at in a couple of months.
Yeah. And Michael, I appreciate
long ass election season in this country.
Yeah. I would just say that there's a number of things you've said that I don't think, I don't agree with that. Like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with around immigration. I don't think I agree around the 3 prongs of power. I would call that more capture than power, and blah, blah, blah. But what I feel like is most important here is, I believe that you want I believe you see a fucked up world like I see. You may have a different idea about how to go about right now trying to change it. But for me, what's important is just staying in conversation with you, because I do feel like you've put your money where your mouth is. Even to the point where you said, wait, I campaigned with that Republican because they were like, that's consistent. That is consistent with what you've said here. I wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying, it's not about Republican. I wouldn't go the electoral way. But
right, I get it.
Consistent. And I just feel like that's what we want to do here at What's Left. Is we can have differences, we can have big differences, but it's about maintaining communication. And then later, let's be honest about how things went. Yes. What was successful? What was not successful? Because the world's coming at us no matter what. The world, I do not see the world becoming nicer, and I do believe we're going to need each other to get through it. And so that, for me, what was important is you standing your ground, hearing us out, and at the end of the day, being friends and building maybe a little trust. Maybe I know better where we have some differences, but I can trust you now because I know you're going to hear mine, and I know what you're going to say, what your opinion is, like what it actually is. So that's really,
and you know what we just did here is exactly, it's like the cornerstone of what Bobby's campaign is about, is let's talk and let's dialogue. And if we don't talk and we don't dialogue, what the hell are we getting into? We're getting into this polarized, dangerous country and world where it's you're with us or you're against us, and that makes no sense. at all. I couldn't agree with you more, Andy. Yeah. No, I really wanted to do this for like multiple
Yeah.
reasons. I'm so glad that we did. I can't wait till it comes out and put it out. We'll put it, promote it at Teachers for Choice and all our platforms and stuff. I'm definitely excited about that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, and also happy belated birthday to Andy, and happy early birthday to Eduardo. It's his birthday week for What's
Thank
Left.
you. Well,
cool.
thank you. You didn't have to do that. Just thank you very much.
Thanks.
We get blushed
Well, you
when
weren't
things
gonna
happen like
say
that. Let's conclude now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. We were joined by Michael Kane, grassroots organizer for the American Values 2024 Super PAC. You can find that on AmericanValues2024.org. Michael, you formerly the national grassroots organizer for Children's Health Defense, and also the founder of Teachers for Choice and the lead plaintiff in Kane versus de Blasio, having been denied a religious exemption request and appeal. Michael, I don't think people know the extent of how the impact that you've had, and you have been an incredible force out in New York, and you have a lot of credit out there for your contribution to the world. Thank you very much.
Will you plug the Teachers for Choice? What's the website? How do people get the email?
Yeah, definitely check us out at teachersforchoice.org. Teachers, FOR, choice.org. Just go there, click on contact, and send me an email. It comes right to me. I'll throw you on our email list.
We'll do that. We'll find all the links in the episode notes. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Odysee, YouTube, or Telegram, Rumble or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. And if you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Jessica and Andy Lipson, and we'll check you all next time. Thank you very much, Michael. Ciao.
Thank you.